Oregon versus Georgia. Where? In Atlanta. What? In a neutral site game. No return trip to Portland scheduled, but yes, this is a neutral site game, or so they tell me. Georgia is getting that mountaintop view. Finally, for the first time, we got a place in Pine Mountain. Back in Harris County, it's called Mountaintop Inn. Some of the coldest pool water in the world. Callaway Bleu flows through the fountains up there. That's one of the biggest benefits of living in Pine Mountain. But that is not where Georgia is. They are figuratively at the Mountaintop Inn. They're finally national champs, and they're finally getting all the adoration or attention, or are they? Because I've told you for the past few months, I feel it's been pretty atypical. There's been so much crap going on off the field and outside the realm of football in this sport, from NIL to conference realignment to everything other than who the national champion is, that there just hasn't been a bright spotlight on Georgia. Even on our show, we haven't spoken about them as much as I would expect to, and I grew up in Georgia. So if you told me, hey, you're going to have a college football show one day, and the team from the state that you grew up in is going to win one, I would have thought it would have just been a red and black love fest for 6 months. Turns out that's not the way it's been. And as a result, if you're worried about complacency, maybe it's still there. They've got a combination of not really having a bunch of praise heaped on them and so many new faces that haven't really earned anything that I just don't think they've got a complacency issue. I could be wrong, and that doesn't mean they'll win every game this year, but if Georgia falls short of, going to the SEC championship game or going back to the playoff, I just think it'll be because of football-related reasons. I don't really think it'll be because of the whole neck-up issue. We'll see. We get to see them take the field this Saturday. What's the selling point for the upset here? Big point spread on this game. Georgia's favored by 17.5. So when we break these big point spread games down, we ask, how would the upset happen if it were to happen? And it's pretty easy to know where an Oregon supporter would go. They would say, we did it last year. We went to Ohio State as a big underdog, and we won last year, and that's true. And I won't take that away from you. I think what a detractor would come right back at you and say is, yeah, but I saw you play Utah twice, and they put you on skates both times. You don't think we can do what Utah did if we're Georgia? You don't think we can match that and then some? So where does Oregon stand in what we call the non-negotiables? Being physical enough against Georgia, being physical enough to just stand up, to maybe just stalemate, to net a draw on the line of scrimmage, that's a non-negotiable because of how many other edges they have against you. That kind of stuff is a non-negotiable. And if Oregon doesn't stand in a better position than they did against Utah in those games last year, none of the rest of this is relevant, and it'll be over by the half. So let's just assume that they're going to be able to answer in the non-negotiable areas. Here's a key, and it's very underrated, I think, in this game. Oregon is good along their offensive line. In fact, they've got athletes all over the place. This is an atypical coaching change. A lot of times when coaching changes are happening, you're thinking, all right, well, that means they've got to rebuild. It's one of the best teams Oregon's had in quite a while, and the offensive line is one of the reasons for that. It could give Oregon more success, especially against a retooled Georgia front, than you think, but here's the follow-up to that. This is not a typical retooling, even with all the NFL talent Georgia lost. First off, they rotated a lot of these guys last year, and secondly, it's like Alabama. You just see a bunch of new faces the first week or two of every season, and with Alabama, you've trained yourself to just blindly expect them to still be good. I would go ahead and tell you, beat the rush. Make that assumption about Georgia. Make them prove you wrong by underachieving. Don't be surprised by how good and talented and deep Georgia is at positions like defensive line and linebacker. They're just going to have them. They're going to have guys. I mean, they've got one. See if you can spot him Saturday. They got one who's probably better and more talented than any defensive player they had last year. You don't even know his name yet. See, just a little quiz. See if you can find out who that is Saturday. But the first of several games is this Saturday, where I think that Georgia tight end room will be too much for someone to match. You don't face anything else like this. You don't face Brock Bowers and then just for fun, Darnell Washington and Eric Gilbert. Oscar Delp, as a freshman, would start for a bunch of your teams and be a postseason all-conference player, and he's running fourth at Georgia in the tight end room. It's the deepest tight end room I think I've ever seen. And I don't know that anyone will ever replicate this because we're in the transfer portal era. How do you go 4 deep at tight end in the transfer portal era? Ask Kirby Smart. He figured it out. Let's take a look at the game capsule. Georgia, minus 17.5 in Vegas right now. The game capsule from our model, a little bit shorter. So the model sees this as Georgia minus 16.5. And by the way, notice how throughout the entire show tonight, the model and Vegas have been right in line. Sometimes in week one, there's some differentiation. Not this year, at least in the games that we chose to select. The cattle prod theory sometimes is in effect in a situation like this. The cattle prod theory, when you've got talent like Oregon has, is if you've got a talented team, I'm talking about like a bunch of future NFL guys on Oregon's roster. Justin Flo plays for them. Justin Flo had an offer from everyone in America. When you've got the kind of talent they have and you're an underdog, sometimes you can have what we call the cattle prod theory, which is where your talent just surprises someone out of the gate to the point where it stuns them. The reason I don't think that's in effect is because of who Georgia has played. And even though you've got some new guys that will be starters Saturday, the identity of that program is such that they've run up against Alabama so many times. They ran up against Michigan last year. They've run up against, plus they practice against each other every day. You don't surprise them with talent level. You've got to out-execute them. You got to outplay them on the line of scrimmage. You got to be able to run the ball on them. And someone may be able to this year. Will it be Oregon? Model doesn't think so. I lean towards the model. So I'll take Georgia to win. With the 17 and a hook, I would probably lean Oregon and the points, but I don't have a strong feel on that at all. Because, I mean, if this gets overwhelming, it gets overwhelming in a hurry. I do think Oregon will have a reputable showing here. This is Dan Lanning's first game. You last saw him as the defensive coordinator at Georgia. I think Georgia is going to end up pulling away in this thing. I think the kind of feel afterwards is you come away saying, man, we got a lot to work on. How nice. How first world of a problem it is for us as a Georgia fan to say, boy, we still got a lot to work on even after this 14 or 16-point win. That's kind of how I feel it'll go, but we'll see. I was asking someone, or someone asked me the other day, what would be the bigger upset? Oregon over Georgia or Notre Dame over Ohio State? I said Notre Dame over Ohio State, but I think I'll probably put that out there as a Twitter poll question because the point spreads are pretty similar. I have a feeling we're going to ask that question and we're going to get a whole bunch of blank and it's not even close. Casual 101. When there is a highly debatable question, the answer is never blank and it's not even close.